Hi, my name is Dr. Matt Harris, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about educational technology and the impact on learning. So, educational technology has lots of impacts across the school, whether it's operations or finance, leadership, all sorts of academic impacts, personnel. But really, the reason we do educational technology, of course, is to impact learning. We're looking for greater depth, more contextualization, greater student agency, making learning more meaningful. And it's really interesting if you spend time talking to people that are really involved with educational technology, you find that the really good ones are experts not only in the technology and not only the education, but the pedagogy, the learning, the curriculum, the impacts on the entire student experience. And I was thinking about that the other day. Why is that? Why is there such a connection between educational technology and these pedagogic experts? Why is it that the discussions we have are so deeply rooted in what it means to learn as opposed to just how do we facilitate tasks? How do we make sure that learning is happening? We actually talk about what learning should happen, what it should look like, how do we know it's effective, how do we know it's impactful. That's the common topic. That is really what we talk about when we go to conferences or we have exchanges online. And then the discussions around the tools really come around facilitating that learning rather than focusing on the tools or the educational technology specifically. And as I was going for this walk the other day, I came to a realization of why that is. Because technology does something in education that nothing else does. It eliminates assumption. So, as educators, we're all trained in various ways of teaching, teaching within a particular classroom setting or online or with younger students or older students, whatever it is, we learn how to teach and we learn what to look for when learning occurs. But with technology, all of that training, all of those assumptions kind of get thrown out the door because technology can facilitate so many different interactions, so many different modalities of learning, so many different ways of just connecting with students. And so when we start talking as educational technologists, that central pedagogy is what ends up coming out because our assumptions of the way it has to work or what has to be learned or what's valuable, those get all thrown out the door. Let me give an example. So one of the assumptions for brick and mortar learning is that students have to be in a classroom. Well, technology says they don't have to. They don't have to be sitting in chairs. With technology, they could be sitting in the back of the room. They could have 3 students in the hallway. They could have 4 students in the study lounge. They could have 2 students in the classroom, and there could be 3 kids at home. I mean, imagine the facility through like a learning management system or the use of video conferencing like Skype or Google Hangouts, the collaboration that's happening in real time, that assumption that students have to be together to experience the learning is gone because of the technology. And the technology then allows us to say, okay, well, if they don't have to be together, how do we make sure that learning occurs? If there's not, what is it that they get out of being together that we can replicate or draw upon or deepen? The technology allows that. Another one might be that the teacher has to be the content expert. And this is a very common discussion point in educational technology circles, that the role of the teacher has now changed to one of being a learning mentor or learning guide rather than being the content expert. And that is because of the technology. Students might have a personalized device that gives them a direct learning experience that is facilitated by the teacher rather than driven by the teacher. Content that a teacher used to be the absolute sage on the stage, that content doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to be within the teacher. It can be available through digital resources, through the internet, through text, whatever it is. The technology allows students to access that, and now the teacher becomes a facilitator of experience and an assessor of learning, which is wonderful. Because now, again, we can talk about what does it mean to learn, and what does it mean, what do students have to learn, rather than focusing primarily on what is the specific experience that has to go forward. What are the things? So as I was thinking about this, another piece that came into my mind was the assumption that students have to be involved at all. Can learning occur if we don't have students? Absolutely. Look at Khan Academy, look at lynda.com. Those things are created for audiences that aren't even there. And they're created under the guise of learning is not something that has to occur within a space and time. Learning doesn't have to occur within a specific modality. Learning doesn't have to occur with a specific language or a specific set of vocabulary. Learning can occur as needed, as applied, as contextualized, and the technology allows that to happen. So as you're looking at educational technology in your school or engaging more in educational technology as a professional, really what I suggest you do is look at pedagogy. Look at what it means to learn, or even andragogy, so the study of adult learning. Because again, there's another assumption that schools that use educational technology are only focusing on children. They're not. We're using educational technology to teach parents and teachers, community members, leaders. Everybody is a learner in a technology-rich environment, because there are so many things you can access, there's so many experiences that can be had, there's so much agency there that everybody has to be seen to be part of this learning organization. So as an action taking this forward, when educational technologists try and have those deep discussions at their schools, what I would suggest is try and avoid being the tech person. Try avoid being the person that has an expertise in the latest app or the latest technology, or can show some exemplar of what you do in your class, because the exemplars that you're showing or that you're trying to get other people to glom onto or connect to are ones that are tied to specific experiences, that are tied to specific technologies. What you're trying to show them is that learning can occur in different ways, and learning can occur in ways that are most applicable to a particular child or a particular adult. So as we're approaching educational technology planning, or you're trying to help schools grow, have that discussion with them of what does learning look like? Now that we know what learning looks like, let's destroy that. Because technology can remove every one of those assumptions, every one of those widely held beliefs that learning has to be this way. And it can replicate things, it can modify things, it can augment things. You'll notice I'm using some language that ties into SAMR, which is a great tool to use when talking about the pedagogy that connects between technology and learning amongst students. You can substitute practice, the S for SAMR, you can augment, you can modify, you can redefine, but all of those elements, you're talking about what does learning really mean for your students, for your institution. Now, of course, you're always going to run into a problem, which is kind of the Achilles heel for those of us in educational technology, and that, of course, is assessment. So pedagogy is valuable, but without assessment and feedback for learning, it's useless. And the problem that we've run into is that educational technology has created this cohort, this cadre of pedagogic experts, those who have thought at depth, who have challenged these assumptions and have created environments within their own schools where learning can be natural and wonderful, but then they're tied to these really arcane and old systems of assessment. And what we realize is that those systems of assessment don't assess learning as a whole. They assess what needs to be accomplished to meet a particular certificate or a particular model of reporting. And yet, learning that's assessed appropriately allows for continuous growth, it's formative, it ties into long-term goals for a student or an institution, not towards passing an exam or earning a certificate. So what educational technologists have to do is they have to balance this line, where you have the discussions at the front end with teachers, with administrators, with planners and funders, saying, this is the environment we're creating. We are going to challenge every assumption about learning, around delivery of curriculum, around creation of curriculum, whatever it is. We're going to challenge it all because technology allows us to do so much more. We can build an environment where the student absolutely comes first. They have agency, they learn deeper, and there's inquiry, and there's cross-content discussions, and there's connections outside of the school, and that time and space are not going to be hindrances for us. Even the technology itself is just a tool pushing forward this great element of learning, but we are also going to focus on the assessments that have to be done. So we're going to create a set of assessments that shows how wonderful this potential learning is and shows us how we can be formative in our learning growth where we can build even more, and we're going to create a set of tools and experiences where students will understand how to successfully navigate the system of regulated assessments. Until those assessments are gone, that will never be an element that we could ignore within educational technology. So what I'm suggesting here is as you're promoting educational technology at your schools, as you're trying to foster these discussions, don't talk about the technology. Talk about learning, and then challenge every assumption. So somebody comes in and says, I have to have a whiteboard. Why? What are you doing on that whiteboard that cannot be replicated by standing in the back of the room with a tablet that's broadcast to all of the students? I have to communicate with my students every day. Okay? Does that have to be in person? Are there other ways to do it? My students need to be working together. Okay, does that need to be live? Can that be virtual? And by together, do you mean together on a single project, in a single geography, in a single time zone, or even at the same time? Could we do this asynchronously? Take each one of those assumptions and challenge them and say, you know what, as we're challenging these things, we're making the learning better. We're not fitting into the kind of old mold of factory style learning where children are sitting in rows and they have pencils and papers. We're creating learning that is contemporary for what students are expecting today. So again, what I would say to you is learn your assessments, learn your pedagogy, and use technology to challenge every assumption you have in your school. Thanks. I'll talk to you later.